Veterans, attention. All civilians and officers, during the playing of our national anthem, please put your hand over your heart in honor of our country and our flag. Veterans, present arms. Take your seats. How was everyone today? Great. Before we get started, I would like to recognize a few elected officials and other dignitaries walking in. Marine and Judge of the 10th District Court, Carrie Neves. John Kennard, our Galveston County District Clerk. Jack Rohde, our elected District Attorney, without whom this program would not exist. Constable Jerry Fisher. Have I missed any elected officials? Representing the City of League City, Chief Mike Cram. Yay! Representing Kemah Police Department, Chief Greg Reichert. Representing Dr. Greg Bonin, State Representative, Faye Picard. Did I miss any other representatives? Fantastic. We have got a great graduation for you this afternoon. I have been looking forward to this since I first learned that our speaker could come and join us this afternoon. Our speaker, his name is Sergeant Bryan Escobedo. Sergeant Escobedo was in the 10th grade at Clear Creek High School, where I have made a few thousand pickups and drop-offs of my children. In 2001, when the Twin Towers were hit, he made a point at that time to say he was going to join the military, which he did upon graduation. After graduating Clear Creek High School, he served in the Marine Corps. He received a Purple Heart and participated in Operation Iraqi Freedom from 2005 to 2007. Sergeant Escobedo is currently working as a veterans advocate, and what he does is he works for a company that kind of pools all resources that veterans have available to them together, and then goes and does outreach and lets people know what they have available to them and how they can get connected to the services they might need. He was awarded the Clear Creek ISD Valor Award and named a Houston Astros Hometown Hero in 2012. One thing I am jealous of, by the way. But he has done something that even I've not been able to do, and I'm not so sure I want to do. He has been able to go on a late night show and survive, and I believe we have footage of that.
So I've already been introduced, but just to reiterate, my name is Bryan Escobedo and I am a local. So I was born and raised here in Houston, Texas, and down in Clear Lake as well. And growing up here, actually my mom is in the crowd too, so growing up here, So growing up here in Houston, I was raised by a pastor dad. My mom and dad were pastors, and they always taught me to love everybody. I grew up in a great environment with the church community, and there was always this legacy of service and of loving everybody and just having this positive view of the world. And as a pastor's son, I just adhered to that, and I internalized that. That was until I actually became a teenager, and this guy emerged, and my mom remembers that. So I became a lead singer in a metal band, and I had blue hair up to here. And I didn't know my mom was going to be in this crowd, so when I prepared the speech, I didn't even plan on saying this stuff. But here she is. She surprised me today. But I'll admit, I had a double life. So my mom would not let me choose my big, crazy clothes that I would wear. So I'd buy some on my own. and I sneak it in my bag, and I get out off the bus or out of my car, and I'd walk back, and I change outfits at school and before I left. And I get to school, I just put blue stuff in my hair and look all crazy. I had all this, all these necklaces, all these bracelets, all this stuff. I was a rocker. And one day, my mom comes home early from work, and I'm walking down the street back to my house, and I just feel like this heat on the back of my eyes is unmistakable. And everybody in here has been in trouble with their mom and knows exactly what I'm talking about. So there she was, and I just hear my name. Bryan Daniel Escobedo. I'm like, oh. And so immediately, I'm like, oh my God, I'm caught. And she made me get back. Now, I also had a secret eye piercing, an eyebrow piercing that she had no idea about. So she told me I can keep it in, but she's gonna yank it out with pliers when I fall asleep. So I had to take it out. So that's my wonderful mama, And I'll tell you, it was so great to grow up in that house, and my mom was just a great inspiration to me, and so was my dad. And it was really about that time, when I was in 10th grade, like the judge said, that September 11th happened, and that changed everything. That changed everything for me, because I just went from being a kid. I mean, everybody, that hadn't experienced anything crazy kind of lost their innocence. And as a country, we hadn't been attacked since World War II, so Pearl Harbor. And so we all kind of lost that sense of security. And I remember sitting in that chair that day, and I decided that I was going to be a Marine, not any other branch. I was going to join the United States Marine Corps because I wanted to do something. Now, mind you, I was at ROTC, so I wasn't like the toughest kid. I was a rocker, and no one believed me when I said I was going to the Marine Corps. Like, no, not you. You're not going to the Marine Corps. But yeah, I started to run. I cut all my bracelets off, and I told my mom, I said, Mom, I want to join the Marine Corps. She's like, yes, honey, that's great. She was a little too enthusiastic, by the way. So I remember on my 17th birthday, I went to the recruiter, and I had all these bracelets that I wore every single day, and I cut all of them off. And it was like this catharsis for her, I'm sure, to see that I took all the stuff out of my hair. I shaved my hair shorter, started running, started exercising, getting ready for the Marines. And then I turned out from this little punk kid with the hair to this guy, so I became a Marine. And my original job in the Marine Corps was aviation and electronics. And so I actually went to boot camp with my cousin Leroy Sandoval. Some of you may have heard him if you live here in the community, but he was killed in Fallujah in 2004. And my cousin was a crazy guy. He was really nuts, but he was a great. He made me tough. He made me tough as a kid. If there was one guy who taught me to wrestle and be tough, it was him. He used to ride bulls and dirt bikes. He loved getting in trouble. So what MOS do you think he chose? 0311, Marine Corps Infantry. So I see one back there, yeah. So he went to the infantry, and I went to the field of aviation and electronics. Now, 18 years old, first time away from home. I did not pass. Instead, I met a girl in New Orleans, started partying like crazy. I didn't pass the school. I didn't study. So I actually got asked to leave the school, and I was so ashamed of myself, because here I am, I'm a Marine, I'm holding myself to this high standard, and I really disappointed myself that I let myself go like that and just party and have a good time. So I made friends with this guy whose parents were a neurosurgeon and a heart surgeon, and I was partying with this guy almost every night, and we'd wake up in the morning and run PT with alcohol in our system and throw up a little bit, and then we go take a test. He makes an A, I make an F, so anyway, so surrounded myself with people that are just troublemakers. So the week that I had to choose a new MOS, I found out that my cousin Leroy was killed. And so I had 7 days to choose a new job. And I got the call from my stepdad, David, and he told me that my cousin was killed in Fallujah. And we grew up together since diapers, and I can't tell you how deep of a pain that felt. I never lost anybody that close to me, even though I lost my grandparents and a few people and experienced a few tragedies. No one that I knew intimately, that I grew up with, that I loved as my own brother. And it just, the grief that I felt from that loss was inexplicable. I mean, it tore me apart. For like a whole day, I couldn't even speak. I was so caught up in this intense emotion of grieving. And I remember going back the next, or 2 days after, I went back to the recruiter, the guy that helps you change your career while you're in the military. And I went up to him and said, put me in the infantry. He goes, well, there's no spots open in the infantry. I said, no, I need to be in the infantry. And he said, I'm telling you, there's no spots right now. You need to choose an MP or some other job. And I go, my cousin was just killed in Fallujah, and I need to get revenge. You got to put me in the infantry. And so he said, I'm telling you, it's full. And his whole demeanor changed. He goes, look, I was infantry. The best thing you can do is be MP and go do personal security detail, or you can be a combat engineer. And I was like, what the heck's a combat engineer? And so he said, well, they do explosives. They augment with the infantry. They live with the infantry. They do everything the infantry does. They just specialize in explosives. And so I said, yes, put me in that. So I was really excited because, I mean, I never thought I was going to get to play with bombs and stuff, but I did. So it was really awesome. So I went on to go to engineer school, and my brother was actually in the same battalion. And during that time, I learned all about explosives. So I went to Iraq, and I remember getting there, all I wanted was revenge. I mean, my heart was just so filled with this intense anger and this I wanted some vindication for what happened to my cousin. And I remember going there with this whole different attitude about the people that I was going to see. And then in being there, I got to work with the locals, and my whole attitude changed toward them. They chose me, a young corporal, to be an XO, which is the second in command. My buddy was a corporal, was a CO, and we're both 21 years old. And we have the bill of an XO in Iraq, and we're having to cover 2 areas of operation. And I got a Navy Achievement Medal for that. I mean, 21 years old and making plans, getting to do exactly what I wanted to see fit. And my whole job was to stop IED making material coming in from the Syrian and Jordanian border. And so we took our job so serious. We ran on convoys. We'd hitchhike on helicopters and convoys to get to where we needed to go to make sure that we were helping to impede the flow of weapons. The other thing, of course, we were doing raids. I fought in the city of Fallujah, in Ramadi, and all over the place, in Al-Anbar province. So it was just an intense time. And then in 2006, I had my first encounter with an improvised explosive device that hit my vehicle. And then there was actually 3 of them my second tour in 2006. And then in 2007, the big one happened, and that's this year. So it was June 22nd in 2007, and this is the one that really injured me. We ran over a landmine with my front right tire, and I remember everything about what happened. And it was just, all of a sudden, it was just, this fire was filling the cabin, and we were all moving, and the explosion knocked all of us out. And I woke up upside down, not knowing what the heck had happened. And then a shot of adrenaline shot to my body. I dropped down, helped my Marines who were injured, and helped to call Medivac. So Medivac came, picked us up. And I remember the whole time feeling this intense pain in my arm. But I decided to mentally block it out of my mind because I needed to help my Marines. And it was a crazy scenario, which I won't get into details of for the time, but I am so grateful to God that I'm standing here today and I did not die that day, because that one was too close. I was medevaced and taken to Al-Assad and a few other hospitals, Baghdad, Balad. I was taken all over the place for all the multiple injuries that I had. I had broken my nose, cracked my jaw, had a traumatic brain injury, both my eardrums exploded, my lower spine was cracked. I had intestinal injuries and burns and shrapnel on my right side of my body. And so this is me in the hospital actually and I remember, I started to form what I didn't know was PTSD in 2006 on my second tour, just being in the combat environment, being in the city of Fallujah, being in that combat environment where you never know who's trying to kill you, but it happens all the time, and then there I am in 2007 thinking, and I remember before I deployed, I told my dad, people were thanking me for my service and saying, hey, you're so brave, and I was like, well, it's not really my choice, And I was angry because I barely made it out of Iraq my first tour. And I was going back, and I was like, man, I'm gonna die this time, And so when this happened, I finally had time to settle all this stuff and reconcile what had happened to me while I was in the hospital. And it was just like a hurricane hit me, All of a sudden, my emotional spectrum was just shortened to anger and depression. All of a sudden, I couldn't feel anything anymore. I was constantly living with these flashbacks during the day when I was awake. And this is even back when I flew back to America. I fly back to America, and every single day I'm having flashbacks. I'm sitting there staring in the corner and just reliving all this crazy stuff that I went through. And then at nighttime, when I'm going to bed, I just have these intense nightmares. So I started drinking a lot, just so I could go to sleep and I wouldn't have nightmares. I know a lot of you veterans that are in here today might know what that's like, to go through that sort of intense trauma. And it was just the most soul-crushing thing. And I felt like I was hijacked, like I wasn't me. This PTSD, this anxiety, this paranoia had taken over me, and I no longer had a choice on what I got to feel or how I got to live. It was all consuming. It was so intense that I didn't feel like I was alive. And I remember my brother, who was in my battalion, who's also a combat veteran, I'd talk to him on the phone, and I'd visit him, and he'd say, Bryan, you need help, man. He's an OAF-1 veteran. He's also a combat vet, but he saw me. He said, you need to get help. And he said, this isn't you. This is not the little brother that I know. And so when he said that to me, I realized, I guess I didn't realize how bad I was suffering until then. And I realized, I can do something about this. So I went to the base, I went to my battalion, asked them for help. And they put me in this great program where we did martial arts, we did mental health counseling, one-on-one and group counseling. And, I decided that just like, when you're in the military, you see a giant objective and you want to conquer it. The military trains you to want to overcome your enemy. That's physical, but that can also be mental as well. And so for me, the mental giant that I had to conquer was myself and my trauma. So I personified that as being something that was attacking me. And I did everything I could, going to individual counseling, going to group counseling, and getting involved with all this therapy. And I'm telling you, it completely changed my entire life. Had it not been for that decision, I would not be the person that I am today. And so I entered this journey of actually facing what had happened. And it's really scary when you first start to go through your points of trauma, because you want to forget about them. The natural thing to do is to suppress the thing that's torturing you, that crazy, your experiences, your traumatic experiences, but instead, with great help, I was able to conquer that and go through it. So little by little, I started to come back to life. Little by little, I started to learn all these practices, and I started acquiring all these tools to deal and digest this experience that I had. And part of that, well, I'll go to the next slide here. I got very lucky when I got back to Houston. So while I was in college, first of all, these are 4 things I did. I was going to therapy. I was enrolled in college, so I was learning. Now, mind you, I was like a B and C student in high school just because I didn't try, But that Marine Corps discipline, I applied it to college. Now, with a brain injury, when I first started college, it was extremely difficult, reading and all this stuff. It took me a long time, but I decided I wasn't going to quit. No matter what happened, I was not going to quit. So it took me a little bit longer to read and to do math, but little by little, my brain started getting stronger and stronger. And if anybody here has TBI, I'm telling you, I'm a true testament. If you learn a diversity of topics and you really push your mind to learn as much as you can, and you're disciplined and gaining little by little, your brain can actually overcompensate for the things that might be damaged in your mind. And I encourage everybody to diversify their knowledge. That's one thing I truly believe in, because I ended up getting a degree in communications with 2 minors in philosophy and psychology. And I never thought I'd be reading philosophy and psychology and stuff, but now that's pretty much all I read, the philosophy and things like that, because I learned to think in that capacity. And I never would have thought I'd be the way I am today. But in doing so, especially when I started getting into philosophy, I started thinking about my impact in the world as a person, as a subject, as a member of my society. So I started volunteering, and I noticed something. When I got out of the Marine Corps, I felt like I was completely lost. Like I had lost my identity, which I'll touch here in a second. But in volunteering and in just standing up in the place where leadership was needed, I felt it reactivated this value that I had inside of myself that was clearly defined when I was in the Marine Corps. And so in doing so, in actually volunteering and taking leadership roles, I felt like I was a Marine again, like I was a squad leader again, So it used that leadership and gave me some value. And so the other thing that I did, of course, is I was very lucky to meet some very good friends that do great stuff in the community with military vets that are positive influences. And I recall having bad friends and having good friends, and what happens when you surround yourself with good people and bad people. It's like night and day. It really is. So I started working with military veterans. I created 2 programs. One of them was Jobs for Vets. The other one was peer-to-peer counseling for military vets. I became a suicide prevention counselor and actually did some intervention with suicides here in the Houston area, or up there in the Houston area. And it was life-changing, because little did I know that I was going to get thrown into this world where now I'm having to respond to veterans actively trying to kill themselves, talking them off the ledge, and mentoring them, convincing them, telling them my story that, hey, you can get better. If you dedicate yourself like I did, you can get better. You can get through this. So I can empathetically tell people, yes, I have a brain injury, I have a Purple Heart, I have PTSD, or being diagnosed with PTSD, but I've also done counseling. I've also fully dedicated myself and never giving up on doing that and pushing forward. And you can get better. You can absolutely get better if you push 100%. Now, working with the vets, I noticed there was a bit of a trend. I'll put this. This is a funny meme. So when you get out of the military, I don't know if you guys remember Major Payne, but when you get out of the military, that shock, that culture shock of not having that rank, not being part of that warrior society. This says, surely there's got to be somebody that needs some killing. No, there's not. So I remember when I got out of the Marine Corps, I was a mean sergeant. Believe it or not, I was a mean sergeant, But I got out and I couldn't yell at anybody. I couldn't tell anybody to go faster or go do this, go do that. There was no knife handing people. It was powerlessness. And you start from the bottom of the social scale and you earn your way up slowly. And for a lot of people, that's crushing, especially when you lose this identity. So what I noticed in working with hundreds and hundreds of veterans is that we all kind of had this thing in common, this transition out of the military. And I want to talk a little bit about that. So this is my theory of veteran transition. This is actually my thesis. It's very short, but I'll try to explain this idea. How am I doing on time, by the way? Good? Okay. I want to explain this idea to you all just to kind of give some context. So in every society, there's a warrior culture, right? And there's something called an archetype. You don't know what an archetype is. Just think, when you think of a Marine, right, might think of somebody in the dress blues holding the sword like in the recruiting posters. And all of us who, by the way, raise your hand if you were in the military. Yeah, so we all got duped by recruiters. Very good. Okay, so raise your hand if you're a recruiter. All right, good to go. All right. So, but when you thought as a young man or a young woman about joining the military, there was this ideal, this perfect image of that sailor, that airman, or that soldier, or that Marine, and you thought, well, if I go to this branch, I'm going to try to strive to be just like that or be as close as I can. And then you have your military experience, and I believe that there's two types of people who join the military. There's the true alphas that are much closer to that archetype naturally. They just are. They're that leader, that outstanding leader that they can't help but be a complete badass, excuse my language, But that's just who they are. And they're the ones that everybody looks up to. Then there's the other 80, 90%, like myself, that joined because I wanted to better myself. And I felt that I had I was lacking in some virtues. And in joining the military, I could make up for that, compensate or internalize those military virtues. And so during the military, you go through this indoctrination where, one, you get indoctrinated into the warrior culture, and you gain the symbols of power. For us, it's the eagle, globe, and anchor, or your rank, or your medals, or your military uniform, or your weapon. All those things are empowering symbols. They're symbols of power. And then you also join a family. Now I know if you were in the military, you know that there's no closer family than the people that you serve with, and you're friends for life. And even at Marines, for instance, I don't have to know another Marine, but if I know that Marine, I know I can trust them with my life. So you join this family, and you're part of this big culture, and you're just really in this machine where your identity is completely Marine, or whatever branch that you're in. And there's something called your self-concept, and that's the way that you look at yourself. So when you join the military, your self-concept, you stuff it with military value. And now, we're living in a time where the United States has a very high opinion and holds the military in very high esteem. So when you join that, you get all this esteem from your countrymen. You get this great clout. You're essentially socially promoted in being in the military. Then the next thing that happens is that it ends. One day out of your life, you get a DD-214, and you go from being in the military to being out, and you're done. And you're not part of it anymore. And your heart, your soul, your dedication, all those things that belong to the military, feel an affinity for it, those continue to exist, but you're no longer in the club, and you're now excluded, and you're sent back home. So within 24 hours, you're back where you started. You're back in whatever town. For me, it was Houston. And I remember people had changed, the streets had changed, the highways had changed, stores and shops had changed, and I just did not feel like I belonged to any of these people. You might have the same experience when you get out of the military, that you ask yourself, the identity crisis happens. It says, who am I now? The grand question is, who am I now? How am I going to top that? And so the rest of your life, if the military defines you, the rest of your life is really finding how to make equal or better than what you were before, to find that social value, that inner dialogue that says, I am equal or better than I was before. And so that's essentially my idea of why we feel that funkiness when we get out of the military, and also why people come to a crossroad where they start getting in trouble. Now, when you lose your identity and you're going through this identity crisis, I believe the vet corps statistics say that 2 years out of the military is the most dangerous time for a vet to make those mistakes, to get in trouble with the law, to make those bad decisions, because you're going through this crazy transition. You're going through this complete shift in who you are and how you see yourself. So I believe this is what my solution. So what I've come up with, and it gets very, very complex. There's a lot more to it than this. But what I want to share with you, because we're a little bit short on time, is what I've found as being a peer mentor, as being a peer counselor, dealing with veterans, referring tons of veterans to mental health counseling, seeing them get better, being friends with all these great people doing great things. I find that these three things, there's three layers of you that you have to manage at all times and be very conscious of how you manage them. And I want to go through these with you really quick, and then we'll conclude the speech. The first layer is the most important one. Now, all three of these layers happen all at the same time. And that's your self-concept, how you view yourself. The next one is your mental health, what's going on inside that mind after deployment, after being out of the military, after maybe having experienced that trauma or that family stress or that major life stress that happened to you. Then the self-discipline, the ability to manage your instant gratification, to offset it by finishing your goal first. And then there's whatever you covered, the inner dialogue. Those things are incredibly important because the difference between a negative thinker and a positive thinker is this, is that a negative thinker, when they're thinking negative, their brain trains them to always say, this is happening because of this or that. It's always someone else's fault. And I have negative expectations, negative outcomes. So everything that happens to them in life, they're going to say, well, this thing is supposed to happen because I have this negative view of life, and I anticipate that these bad things are going to happen. The positive thinker says to themselves, with the same stimulus, with the same environment, they say, well, we can figure this out. We can get through this. We can pass this. This is just a small bump in the road, but I can overcome it. And that's what I'm supposed to do. That's what life is for. So it's simply the way that you train your brain and your thinking, and that inner dialogue is incredibly important. And I'm really addressing the vets here. That inner dialogue is everything, because if you don't manage that, if you don't get rid of that negative thinking, if you don't stop that negative voice saying that you deserve what you're going through, or that it's never going to get better, or that just because you may have been arrested or incarcerated and now you're a criminal and you're no good, or that you've lost your honor from being in the military, is simply not true. It isn't, and I can tell you that myself, because this life is what you make it. So I'm going to go to number 2, the proximal layer. So this is your most intimate relationships. The second layer is the people that love you, and I really believe that if you're going to spend your time with anybody, it should be the people that love you back, not the bad people. And this is what I was saying with me having bad friends and me having good friends. I've completely cut out the bad people in my life, and I just won't do it. And I encourage you all to do the same thing. The people that love you back are the only people worth your time. And just remember that. That second layer is you managing your relationships. You can't manage your relationships if you don't manage yourself. If you're suffering with depression, PTSD, or anxiety, or anger, any of those things, you have to conquer those first before you can really succeed in layer 2. All right, layer 3 is also very important. This happens simultaneously, but you are here in Galveston or in Houston, or you're in this area. You live in a community. I believe it's very important to be part of that community, to be aware of it, to know, to give to it, to be a contributing member of society. I'm a big believer in volunteer work. I'm a big believer in just doing random acts of kindness, because every time you do that, you're making the world a better place, and loving unconditionally, because love is a chain reaction. When you do good for others, when you do good for your community, when you love and expect nothing in return, or give and expect nothing in return, it creates a chain reaction. And it also gives you honor in doing so. Your professional self as well, I won't get to that, but also planting roots in your community. And I believe that no matter where you live, find a cause you're passionate about. Find something that you can give to. I volunteer with the Mission Continues. I'm a mentor, all these other things. But guys that have gone through this, they're going through this program right now. Right now you're going through this, and something bad is happening. You're paying this consequence for it, but it doesn't define you. It doesn't define who you are. And I'm telling you, life is very long. You take what happened here, you milk it for wisdom. You take that raw experience and you refine it into something good. You refine it into wisdom, and then you turn around and tell other people how not to do that, or what lessons you learn. So in everything bad that happens, there's always some positive outcome you can draw out of it if you look hard enough. So I want to just leave you all with that idea. But thank you for having me today, and I really appreciate your attention. I hope you guys took something away from this. I'm honored to be here. So thank you so much.
All right, we're here for the good part, to graduate 2 of our troops this afternoon. And they know there's only one thing standing between them and graduation. So Corporal Garcia. The floor is yours.
I'm not much of a talker, so I want to thank all the staff. It really helped me a lot. Never thought I could stop drinking. I went on a year. Thank you.
Amen.
Sit down.
You see that if you want? Specialist Gonzales. I got to tell the group a little bit earlier, but Specialist Gonzales holds a special place in our heart because he was not a fan of group. He made it clear he wasn't a fan of group. I made it clear it wasn't an option. After about 2 sessions, he says, "That's the best thing ever. Why was I resisting?" Well, the floor is yours.
First off, I'd like to take special thanks to everybody here. This has been more than just me getting the help that I needed. Going to group, like the judge said. I don't look at it as a group. I look at it as family now. These guys are my brothers. This has been life-changing for me. It's helped me get my life back, the life that I should have had. I don't want to take too much time, but there's a poem I can read real quick. And when this poem was read to me, it really opened up my eyes, and it kind of touches on some points she said. It goes, a soldier with PTSD fell into a hole, and he couldn't get out. A senior NCO went by. A soldier with PTSD called out for help. The senior NCO yelled and told him to suck it up, dig deep, and drive on. Then threw him a shovel. The soldier with PTSD could not suck it up, and he couldn't drive on. So he dug the hole deeper. A senior officer went by, and the soldier with PTSD called out for help. The senior officer told him to use the tools that his senior NCO had given him, then threw him a bucket. The soldier with PTSD was using the tools his senior NCO gave him, and he dug the hole deeper and filled the bucket. A psychiatrist walked by. The soldier with PTSD said, "Help, I can't get out." The psychiatrist gave him some drugs and said, "Take this, it will relieve the pain." The soldier with PTSD said thanks, but when the pills ran out, he was still in the hole.